Hello and welcome to Moneylife. This is Sucheta Dilal. This week, we talk about us, the consumers. Do we get justice, or is justice, redress, and most importantly, compensation just a mirage when you suffer deficient services? Take a look at this. What happened this time is that this thought process got triggered by an email that I received from someone that we had helped in 2018. And it got me thinking. Ever so often, when you post something on social media, on Instagram, X, you get a host of well meaning people coming onto your timeline and telling you, take them to court, demand compensation, make them pay. Most of these people haven't filed a complaint even with an ombudsman. Forget about going to a consumer court or a civil court. They do not understand that reality is vastly different from getting aggressive and reading about court cases, because most of the time, by the time we look at a final judgment, it involves years and decades of a fight. Having said that, in fact, this is a very good time to be a consumer. Awareness about bad products or service has increased through social media. People understand their rights, and the empathy from fellow sufferers who are quick to retweet and quote tweet and pass their own comments makes sure that reputational damage for bad service is much higher than the cost of grievance redress. This has forced lots of large companies to invest a lot of money on quickly resolving issues. They have teams looking at it, they have bots, they have responses, and they use even things like artificial intelligence to be able to redress all the simple things that happen, which may be just negligence, carelessness, or whatever on the part of staff. Those that are more conscious about these things are people much more easily hit by reputational damage, like hotels, airlines, restaurants, food companies, consumer goods. Because if you read a negative report, you're not likely to touch that product again. Maybe airlines, you don't have a choice, but everywhere else you would. Would you buy a brand of X biscuits if you hear something negative about it? You'll go for Y. You have lots of options. The same applies to personal care products. They respond with alacrity. In fact, major companies are spending a packet on reputation management, which works well for them in both ways. I've been saying this week after week. It lets them create positive narratives about themselves, and it lets them control the damage because they instantly know when someone complains and they're able to staunch it right there. Now, studies have shown that things get really tricky when it comes to dealing with the public sector, because when it comes to Sarkar, you're really on your own. So public sector, power companies, telecom companies, financial services, especially public sector banks, post office savings, these are where complaints get concentrated. And then the two big ones, public and private insurers and hospitals. It's the same. They fight you. Even here, things have improved because of PG Portal. This is a central portal where you can register your complaints easily. They are passed on to different ministries and departments and companies. And again, like I said, if it's a simple question of negligence or carelessness, gets fixed instantly. So people say it works well. But the minute it's complex, it's sometimes just closed by taking a response from the company. So the company says you handled it, or the customer is at fault, end of story. So there is no real redress. But remember, I'm still talking only about redress. Now, getting your problem resolved, your account is blocked because of KYC, it restarts. That is just redress. What about all the harassment, trauma, loss that you have suffered at the time when it is not resolved? From the time you discover there's a problem, there can be magnitude of issues that come up from it. That requires compensation. That requires a deterrent action against the company so that this kind of carelessness, which causes serious damage to consumers, is not repeated. And it's especially true of insurance, because you pay premium for that rainy day when you expect to get paid, or a hospital where you go to get treated, not to die or make things worse for yourself. So these are cases where I keep saying compensation is literally a mirage. We have consumer courts. They were supposed to operate much faster. They're easier to access. You can file a complaint yourself. You don't need a lawyer. But cases have piled up in consumer courts, and justice delivery, believe it or not, the stronger your opponent, the longer it takes. Because at each stage, they know how to use delays. They know how to get postponements. They appeal from district to state, from state to the National Commission, which is called the National Consumer Disputes Redressal Commission, sometimes further to the Supreme Court, and only then a matter gets resolved. This can take, believe it or not, from anywhere between 3 to 5 years to 22 to 25 years. Yes, there have been cases, and I'm going to talk more about this. All this, like I said, was brought home to me from an email that I received from Dr. Ajay Sood, a California-based doctor who's fought a long battle with Bank of India's Chandigarh branch. He had a big deposit in that branch, which was actually used for which was supposed to be used for his mother, who lives in India. One fine day, he discovers that 1.33 crore, yes, crore, just vanished from his account in two large debits, one of 98 lakhs, another of 35 lakhs. Now, the minute the debit is in lakhs, you expect the bank to take care, even if it's 1 lakh rupees or 50,000. In fact, some private banks send me alerts for even 20 and 30,000 rupees credited to my account because it's considered a large debit. We talk about 98 lakhs and 35 lakhs. What kind of due diligence did the bank do? He's tried calling the branch, he tried calling the chairman, he emailed everybody, he wrote to the RBI, he kept calling RBI from California. Nobody would pay attention to him. Then he discovered Moneylife Foundation. We really pushed hard to try and help him. That's why we've written a series of articles about this case. And I'm not going to discuss this case alone. I'm talking about a larger issue this time. But if you want to read it, there's a link. You can go to Moneylife and read my columns on this. But here's what happened. So this goes back to September 2018. We pushed the case. It got escalated. Bank of India told him to file a case. He hired himself a lawyer, filed a complaint. The bank then first said that if his money has been withdrawn through 2 checks, it must be people known to him. Dr. Sood produced the original checks, which he still had in his possession, to show that there's no question of those checks being used. So the checks were obviously forged. Now, it didn't stop at that. They produced an Aadhaar card, changed his phone number, possibly in order to get an OTP, sent a message from an unregistered email. And the bank was careless through all of this. So he doesn't have an Aadhaar card, but the fraudsters produced an Aadhaar card with the same photo that is on his bank records, but got his father's name wrong. If the bank had been careful, all this could have been checked, but it did not happen. In December 2018, the bank filed a police complaint, like I said, and they finally caught a gang of people who are operating across states, defrauded many people. 2 of them happened to be the ones who were used and whose accounts were used in Dr. Sood's case. So the bank quietly recredits this 1.33 crore without a word to him, no apology. And a little later, in October 2019, they also credit interest for that amount when the money had disappeared from his account. So it's no big favor. Money was supposed to be there. He was supposed to earn interest. They credited back because he was not at fault. Meanwhile, think about the mental agony and harassment that he had suffered. He obviously wrote to the bank saying, this is all very well, but what about compensation? Obviously, they ignored it. So he decided to file a complaint with the District Consumer Forum. And the response is stunning. This is not a small fraud. For an individual saving bank account, 1.33 crore is a large amount. But the District Consumer Forum rejected his demand for compensation, saying, and I'm quoting from the order, he wanted a penal interest of 18% also. But here's what the forum said, and I'm quoting. The sole grouse of the complainant through the present complaint is that the amount of 98 lakhs and 35 lakhs was debited fraudulently from his account. Now, the Consumer Forum says, though the amount was made good, he still wants interest at 18% for the period when the amount was fraudulently debited, and he wants compensation and litigation cost. The district forum thought he's asking too much. Isn't that surprising? It said no case is made out against the bank, though the bank failed in due diligence, because he said the bank actually acted on his complaint and returned the money and paid interest for that period, as though that was a favor by the bank. Remember, the bank wasn't even answering him. In most civilized countries, cost and compensation would be considered basic and fair. After all, Dr. Sood had incurred legal fees, paid for US documentation to initiate legal action, made a couple of trips to India to follow up the case, and don't forget the mental agony and trauma. Imagine if you had 1.3 crores just vanishing from your account. What would you go through? So he was not willing to give up, and he appealed to the state forum. On 5th October, a couple of weeks ago, he's got a ruling from the State Commission, which has, if you ask me, slightly better results, but he's going to leave it at that. Now, at the State Forum, they framed the moot question, as they called it, as whether he was entitled to get any compensation. Dr. Sood had produced several RBI circulars, one of 2014, which required the bank to exercise due care and initiate several preventive measures, including what kind of check was issued, in order to prevent specifically check-related fraud. And RBI had issued the circular after discovering that fraudulent checks are made and the originals are with the customer and similar checks are used to defraud them. A circular dating back to 2013 on fraud reporting procedures is also extremely detailed. The bank doesn't seem to have followed it up. This applied especially to large amounts like 100 lakh. Here it was 1.33 crore. There's a 2017 circular that had happened. This was again a result of Moneylife Foundation's campaign and tweet morcha, where they limited customer liability in the case of digital fraud. This ought to have been extended to physical fraud as well. But he pointed out that in case of digital fraud, if you have a circular, the same should apply to me as well, that customer liability should be limited and the money should be credited back when the customer is not at fault within 10 days. Now, Bank of India made the stunning argument that it was also a victim because this was fraud. So just because the bank is a victim, we trust the bank. But the bank thinks that I'm also a victim. I've paid back your money, paid interest. I don't need to compensate you. So I've returned it, right? Bank is a trustee of our funds. It is required to have foolproof systems, supposed to exercise due diligence, verify transactions. That's its job. That is why we keep our hard-earned tax pay savings with the bank. Instead, here's the bank having ignored his complaints, then even said, must be people known to you. And now, why should we compensate you? Because we are equally a victim. Fortunately, the State Forum's opinion was that interest payment is not just compensation. There should be a fair compensation for mental agony, harassment, and financial loss. So it has ordered a compensation of 5,33,627, very minutely calculated on the basis of expenses submitted by the good doctor. 9% interest to be paid within 30 days for this period, obviously from 2018. Of this, 2 lakhs is for mental agony and the rest is for costs. If it's not paid within 30 days, the rate of interest increases to 12%. Now, though Dr. Sood is willing to close the matter, remember there's always a chance that Bank of India could be brazen enough to go to NCDRC, the apex forum. Many corporations do that. Whether or not it's justified, they end up spending more money on legal fees rather than on compensating their customer who has entrusted them with money and given them business. They can use insurance to cover such exigencies, but companies prefer to fight the customer. These are lonely battles and lead to a Pyrrhic victory because they don't even cover really the cost and effort involved and often even the legal fees. This is especially true for cases of medical negligence, where typically they drag for 10 to 15 years. In fact, the larger the compensation demanded, the more it drags, sometimes as much as 22 years. I pulled out a few cases from NCDRC to show you how bad things are. So the only really positive one that I saw, because it got fixed in 5 years, was an order of May 2023. The NCDRC in this case had ordered a compensation of 2 crores for a customer who got badly, her hair was badly damaged by the ITC Maurya's beauty salon in Delhi. It cost her a career. She was a model. And the apex court decided that this was a fair compensation. The matter went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court thought it was too much and asked the NCDRC to reconsider the compensation. This case was filed in 2018. Final decision of the NCDRC in 2021 went to the Supreme Court, came back, and here's the good news. NCDRC stood by its order. It said 2 crore is fair and in fact added 9% interest to its original order. Now, what should really worry us is that appeals from the Apex Consumer Court, NCDRC, go to the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court thinks 2 crores is too much when the livelihood of a person in a high-profile career is damaged, then what does it tell you about how we can expect compensation and redress? Another case, 2013, the NCDRC granted a compensation of 5.96 crores for medical negligence. This was against a Kolkata-based hospital called Amri. It's the biggest compensation order I've seen. Even doctors have been asked to pay a part of it. But here the matter was the opposite. It went to the Supreme Court and NCDRC was asked to enhance the original compensation of 1.73 crore that it had ordered in 2011. The case pertains to the wife of Dr. Anirudh Shah, who died in 1998 due to medical negligence. So look at the timeline. Death in 1998, NCDRC order in 2011, goes to the Supreme Court, reverts back to NCDRC, and finally an order in 2013. How many years is that? 15-year battle for justice. Is it enough? Does it really compensate? I don't know. Third case, which is more typical. 2008, a family sought compensation of 3.10 crore after the death of the 37-year-old breadwinner, again a Kolkata hospital. A 15-year battle ensues. In April 2023, NCDRC gave a compensation of 60 lakhs and 2 lakh in legal fees after a 15-year battle. And legal fees, anyone who knows what legal fees are would know that most of the compensation would go as legal fees itself. A fourth case, Delhi's Mata Chandan Devi Hospital asked to pay just 10 lakhs after a 22-year battle, rejecting the family's plea to enhance the compensation to 50 lakhs. Another case, not only is the average time as long, but this is Batra Hospital. NCDRC retained the 10 lakh compensation ordered by the state government, but reduced the penal interest from 12% to 7%. Yes, these are sad cases. We have written detailed stories on this. There are links that we're showing here, and you can go to Moneylife and look at the original orders. All this is to point out that consumer battles in India are only for those who primarily seek to make a point. They want the side consumers spend time, money, anguish in an unequal basis, which can hire expensive lawyers who are more knowledgeable. They know all the tactics that can be used, and they are deployed against you. It's only when courts begin to empathize with consumers, begin to issue seriously large deterrent penalties and compensation, that is when companies will realize that settling and resolving matters quickly is more important, because you never know the compensation ordered by the court can be higher. Here, after dragging people through decades of litigation, the compensation is paltry. Don't forget, a large number of people just simply give up right at the district level because the case drags on these days. It doesn't get completed in the 9 months envisaged when the Consumer Protection Act was passed. In fact, the process itself is a further punishment and true justice a mirage. If you agree, share this video and join an effort to demand better rights for us. Thank you.